Hi, everyone, and welcome to Politico's event, Making Digital Work for SMEs. I'm Nick Vinacore, Politico's tech editor, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this event. We live in an increasingly digitized economy, especially so during the pandemic and during the lockdown. Everybody is ordering online, conducting business through video conference and things like above. This has been an extraordinary boon for some of the biggest tech companies like Google and Amazon. But what about the small and medium enterprises? How are they faring in this digitized pandemic economy? We know that some of them have suffered as a result of market fragmentation, differing tax rules, and even unfair trading practices in the past couple of years. And the evidence we have in so far is that these problems have increased during the pandemic. Now, in the coming weeks, in early December, the date has been pushed from the 2nd to the 9th. We'll be getting a major legislative package from the European Commission. On one hand, the Digital Services Act, which is going to look into illegal content and content moderation, but also the issue of counterfeit or faulty products being sold online. And on the other hand, the Digital Markets Act, which is going to look at gatekeeper platforms such as Facebook and Google, and a list of banned practices such as self-preferencing for them online. So as we, and just last week, let's remind people that Amazon faced charges for using third-party data to reference its own goods over those of competitors in a major antitrust investigation launched by Margaret Vestager in the European Union. We're going to discuss all of these challenges over the next hour. I want to thank our partner for this event, eBay, for making this possible. I want to thank all of you who have tuned in online to watch this event. I want to encourage you to ask questions and participate in any way you can via Slido, via the hashtag digital for SMEs. That's where you can get your questions in and get the participants to react to your thoughts on what's going on here. And we're also going to have a poll that's going to be active throughout the discussion. And the question we're going to be asking is, what's the biggest challenge to European SMEs selling online and internationally? Go in and get your voice heard right there. And I also encourage you throughout the discussion, starting now, to tweet your reactions, your impressions at hashtag digital for SMEs. And with that, that's enough for me. I'm going to turn the platform over to Rob Hattrell from eBay for his introductory remarks. Welcome, Rob.
Thank you very much, Nick, and thank you everyone who is listening today. And thank you for Politico for their partnership in organising this event jointly with us here at eBay. How to make digital work for SMEs in Europe. Digital transformation has been happening for years. We all live, work and engage, and we shop more than ever before. That change has been constant and actually sustained for some time now. But it is brought about by the COVID-19. That change is inexorable and irreversible. Across Europe, the challenges faced by offline commerce make this transformation of our digital lives even more essential than before. Physical retail has had to either be shuttered or it's challenged, consumer confidence wavering. SMEs are looking for sources of economic opportunity to sustain their businesses, sustain employment and sustain livelihoods. What has always been a growth agenda, in some cases, sadly now, is just a simple matter of commercial survival. When I talk to our SME sellers at the moment, I hear their number one priority always is to continue to do what they've always done in the most normal way possible. This means sell their goods to their customers that they serve in an unhindered way. I also hear from many of them that are starting out, beginning their journey as new businesses, exploring new opportunities that they can access online. And many of these SMEs have physical presence too, an online business, in this case, providing much needed commercial viability, structural resilience in very turbulent times. So whether they're new or established, online only or with a physical presence, all of these SMEs have the same ambition when I talk to them. and that is to grow their business and to create economic opportunity for themselves and the community around them, delivering creative products and unparalleled value to customers wherever they can access them on an increasing far-reaching scale. And it's my view that the internet and technology can enable them to do just that. We at eBay have pioneered that model since 1995. We now enable 19 million sellers worldwide to connect with 183 million buyers all over the globe. In the EU alone, 98% of business sellers export, and on average to an average of 21 different countries every year. eBay, like many online services, offer important opportunities to European SMEs to grow their businesses online. This remains my total focus and the total focus of me and my team and everyone here at eBay. But according to Eurostat, only 17% of the EU's businesses have received online orders in 2019. Only 6.9% are exporters. Undoubtedly, the crisis will drive those numbers up in 2020. The question remains significant, how to support that significant growth in the long term. And it's in this context, I believe it's important that SMEs have a policy framework they can trust and a true digital single market to expand into. The panelists of today are going to debate what that means with the Digital Services Act arriving soon, but I wanted to share some final opening thoughts on the matter to help. First, while Europe debates the regulation of online services, I'd encourage us not to forget who really stands behind a company like eBay. We are a pure third-party marketplace. We don't sell goods. We never compete with our sellers. In fact, our success entirely depends on the success of those SMEs. Those SMEs need to be recognized as independent businesses, owners of the trust their customers place in them. And even though we as the marketplace can create additional trust, we must ensure that we do not burden SMEs with excessive controls and rules. We must seek legislation that empowers and enables SMEs. These are the powerhouses of our economies. Secondly, digital infrastructure is key. Make no mistake, this is not just about broadband and 5G. SMEs selling goods online need to deliver these goods offline. Access to reliable and affordable and competitive postal services. Cannot let them be at a disadvantage over large players or force them to operate only from centers. And thirdly, SMEs must be empowered in new markets, beyond their borders at the very least. Within the EU, SMEs should be confident the rules should be largely the same as at home. It's crucial to let them play on a level playing field against multinationals who have dedicated entire teams of legal compliance. Simplicity and uniformity is key for a competitive environment that benefits customers. And finally, before I hand you over back to today's panelists, let me leave with the most important idea of all. The internet has given us unprecedented power today to bring down the barriers of trade and indeed global trade for SMEs. eBay's founder, Pierre Midyar, was driven by the idea of placing people at the center of technology and using technology to create economic prosperity for all. We do our best to carry on that work today. And that notion is to use technology to empower human beings from any walk of life, any background, to create their own economic opportunity in whatever way suits them. That is ultimately about democratizing the very concept of trade. So truly, really, the debate of today is not just about making digital work for SMEs in Europe, it's about making it work for all of us. I'll hand it back to you now, Nick.
Rob, and without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panelists. We have Alex Agius-Saliba, who's an MEP from Malta with the S&D Group, rapporteur of the Digital Services Act Initiative Report in the IMCO Committee. We have Ricardo Castanera, Digital and Technology Counselor with the Portuguese Permanent Representation to the EU. We have Andreas Muller, who's the owner of Delta Tech. And we have Victoria de Posson, Senior Manager Public Policy for CCIA. And of course, my colleague, Laura Kayali, is going to guide you through the discussion today. Over to you, Laura.
Hi, thank you, Nick, for the presentation. So before we start the conversation, let's take a look at the poll's results, which should appear on your screen. So from the results, the three biggest challenges for SMEs in Europe, 38% of respondents said that regulatory fragmentation was the main challenge. Then 31% said it was unfair trading practices when dealing with the largest platforms. And the third biggest challenges, according to the poll's results, are competition from companies outside the bloc who don't abide by the same consumer standards. So, Andreas, I'm going to turn to you first because you have on-the-ground experience with your company. So, as a medium European company, for you, what are the main challenges when you're operating in the European Union?
Yeah, I totally agree with the two first points. So the fragment rules are one big issue because, for example, when we are discussing, so taxes is maybe the easiest one, but it isn't actually easy for small companies. But there are some other issues like packaging, when you want to recycle or want to pay the fees in certain European countries. Every country has different rules. I think that's a big challenge for many medium-sized companies or small companies. We have 80 employees, and we are still not able to follow all rules because it's very complicated all over Europe. And yeah, the second one is also there are two ways you can look at it from the point of view how marketplaces or retailers are acting and are making it complicated or in some ways nearly impossible to sell. And the other point is how brands are reacting. A lot of brands have still sales restrictions that you are not allowed to sell on marketplaces.
Okay, and before I turn to the policymakers here on the panel to discuss the regulatory response to those challenges, Victoria, so you represent platforms. How can the platform economy benefit SMEs?
Thank you so much, Laura. And I really want to assure you that the tech industry cares so much about SMEs, about its business users, but also about its consumer. And it's very important for the tech industry to make sure the online world is safe for them. So we think that the Digital Services Act is a great opportunity to create a better functioning EU digital single market, to provide clarity on everyone's responsibility and to better safeguard online rights. So hopefully Europeans will continue to enjoy all the economic and social benefits of digital services. So your question, Laura, about how SMEs could be enabled by digital platforms, I think it's already very much the case, and we have to make sure that the DSA won't harm the benefits that they provide to SMEs. As Andrew was saying from eBay, it's important because digital services success mainly depend on SME success. So sometimes we think that there is a struggle there, but that's not the case. And that's why it's very important that consumers, as much as SMEs, are safe and happy when they use digital intermediaries.
So as Nick said in the introduction, the Commission is expected to present the Digital Services Act in only a few weeks. Alex, in your report in the Parliament, you have a whole chapter on online marketplaces. So what are the main points of your report on that, your main recommendations? And on this particular topic of marketplaces, what were the main sticking points between the political groups?
So first of all, hi Laura, and thanks for Politico for this invite. It's a very timely event, a few weeks before the Commission will issue its proposals on the DSA and DMA, and also coming after a few weeks after the Parliament's approval of the three main reports in IMCO, URI and LIBE on the Digital Services Act. Yes, one of our main focuses of the IMCO report when it comes to digital service providers was online marketplaces. There were a number of problems which have been there and which were not new and not novel during the COVID-19 pandemic when it comes to online marketplaces. And I believe that from both technical and also political negotiations being undertaken during the past months, the chapter on online marketplaces was one of those chapters which basically united all the political groups behind it. So there weren't many disagreements because I believe that there was also a feeling in the European Parliament that some of the problems which are prevalent on online marketplaces, we have a golden opportunity with the DSA to be able to tackle them. And that's why we have dedicated a whole chapter. I think that the most important proposals in our DSA report are also reflected in the answers of the questionnaire that you have started in the beginning of this event. So one of the biggest issues is the competition element between those sellers who are using the infrastructure of online marketplaces which are established in third countries, which are targeting directly our markets, our consumers, our citizens, and competing directly with European sellers. And there is a very big imbalance right now. When we are trying to basically do away with this imbalance, first of all, by giving an extraterritorial effect to the provisions that we are moving forward. So those players who are targeting directly our market, our citizens, our consumers will have to abide by our rules, will have to abide by our technical harmonization on health and safety, for example, which is of utmost importance to our consumers. And then we are also moving forward other provisions, for example, a representative in the union. So if something goes wrong, there is someone who can answer for this, and other recommendations, for example, strengthening Article 5 of knowing your business customer, which for us is of utmost importance, these provisions to achieve a level playing field and finally achieve the main goal of our report, which is that of creating an environment where what is illegal offline should also be considered to be illegal online. This is not the situation right now when it comes to online marketplaces and the level of consumer protection which is afforded to our citizens online and offline, and our recommendations basically point in that direction.
EU Council in January. Okay. Can you hear me?
Now, yes.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
For some seconds, please, could you repeat?
Okay, perfect. So Portugal will become the EU presidency in January after Germany. So what are broadly your digital priorities, and then more specifically, what do you expect from the DSA?
Well, Laura, first of all, thank you. Thank you for the invitation and having me here. Indeed, digital will be one of the 5 big priorities for the Portuguese presidency. And I would say at the heart of the presidency's policy goals, we have the conviction that digital transition is a strong driver of economic recovery, but also an unique opportunity to strengthen the single market. Then the digital empowerment, not just of citizens, but also businesses, and within businesses, the smallest companies, sustained by this time a really strong, trustworthy, ethical, legal environment, I would say, which can foster an open and more, I would say, democratic society at the same time to boost the European growth and development. And last but not the least, we will talk and we will focus also on digital democracy and that dimension that should be reinforced and put also Europe as a global player when we talk about digital principles, but also the democracies. Regarding the DSA, as you can imagine, it will be on the table, and it will be for sure one of the most important files during our presidency. We're going to have a lot: AI, Data Governance Act, European EID, but DSA, it's really for sure one of the most important ones. And because we are talking about SMEs, we believe that the overarching goal of the DSA must be to ensure that the digital markets and ecosystems remain open, competitive, fair to all players, and of course where SMEs and also startups, the small players, find countless opportunities for growth. While we recognize, and Victoria, she mentioned some, that platforms play a very important role as startup hubs, but we also understand, and we are meeting a lot of dozens and dozens of stakeholders and also other colleagues from other member states. And we also understand that certain unfair practices in the market must also be addressed, and the DSA is a timely opportunity for that, because fair competition is absolutely a driver for innovation and investment in Europe.
Okay, thank you. So Andreas, back to you. We've mentioned unfair practices. Is that something that you have experienced? And if so, could you tell us a bit more about how it is on the ground?
In some ways. So, for example, what happens is you have for example, I know one audio brand very well. They are producing or leader of multi-room speakers. They say, okay, they sell by themselves to Amazon, and you are also to sell these speakers on Amazon Marketplace, but you're not allowed to sell them on eBay or other marketplaces. And that gets to a very unfair competition, because as a seller, you're not you cannot go to other marketplaces and offer the same products to customers. And so what will happen, that customer will choose for one leading marketplace when they do not get the items on other marketplaces. That's one thing. And the other thing we experience at the moment is, for example, all or the major parcel service are rising their prices, and for us at the moment it's very hard to offer very competitive prices to Spain, to Portugal, or most of the South European countries, and that's something what makes it very complicated for us as a seller in the middle of Europe. We are located in southwest Germany, close to the French border, and these markets are closed for us because we are not competitive with shipping prices over there.
Okay. And you have two policymakers here on the panel. What is your message to them? What do you expect from Europe to help you?
Yeah, what's important is that there isn't. We should be careful with the concentration on online marketplaces. So online marketplaces are good for small and medium sellers. They help them to grow their business, but the rules have to be fair. So there should be rules for a fair play, that you can compete on all marketplaces, and marketplaces can compete with each other. There should be no difference. And the other point is we have to be careful what happens with the parcel service, because in Germany it's a little bit like that, that some companies have advantages in shipping time because they are quite big, and these parcel provider parcel services prefer the big companies, and small companies, when they ship the parcel to a customer, it can take maybe 1 or 2 days longer. And when customer have the experience with that, they maybe will prefer buying from larger companies, what will also lead to a concentration on the market.
Okay. So when we talk about unfair trading practices, we have shifted from the Digital Services Act to the Digital Markets Act, which shows how interlinked those two pieces of legislation are. So Victoria, in some platforms in your memberships are good candidates to be identified as gatekeepers. So how do you perceive this conversation around platforms who have too much power and who should have obligations when they deal with their business users?
Well, first of all, let me say that CCIA has been created more than 50 years ago, and we were created initially to really support open markets and competition. And so we really support efforts to increase competition today. With the Digital Markets Act today, there is some rumors, because the proposal is of course not yet out, and we really look forward to seeing it. But so we hear that there could be some practice ban. And what we generally stand is that if a practice is unfair, well, we should ban it, and we should support a fair competition. But we wouldn't differentiate based on the size, the different players, because if a practice is unfair, it's unfair whether you're small or whether you're big. So that's why we rather recommend an evidence-based and case-by-case assessment of intervention. But if a practice is unfair, well, then we should support competition and we should support a level playing field. So to promote more competition and give the consumer the choice, while avoid unintended consequences.
And indeed, the Commission is considering a blacklist of banned behavior. Alex, do you agree with the idea of blacklists?
So what is the starting point of the discussion on the DMA? with greater power comes greater responsibility. And what is the situation right now? So, and with Victoria, I don't agree with one point, or we can agree on one point. So, first of all, the start of the discussion when it comes to the DMA is how are we going to define who exactly these systemic players are? These systemic players who have a gatekeeper role. So that is the starting point, and we are moving forward in our report, a number of indicators, not only economic indicators, and not only indicators which are based on size. Therefore, the ruler for identifying who these systemic players are should not be just a matter of the big players, but there should be a number of indicators pointing in the direction of a player having a gatekeeper role. But for us, this is of utmost importance. First of all, we are putting a lot of pressure on the Commission, and we were totally clear in our recommendations that we don't want this to be a competition tool. We want this to be a single market tool, because the idea behind these ex-ante rules is that traditional competition law has failed to tackle uncompetitive practices of systemic players having a gatekeeper role, and therefore ex post measures have totally failed. Therefore, our idea is to have a separate instrument from traditional competition law to tackle these behaviors. And yes, there should be a list which basically will rule out a blacklist, yes, ruling out a number of behaviors which definitely are leading today to an uncontestable environment, an uncompetitive environment, which ultimately will also, and today we are discussing the smaller players, today we are discussing our SMEs, today we are discussing also European businesses. 85% of European businesses amount to SMEs. So it is of utmost importance that we have a competitive environment built upon a number of rules. Therefore, the DMA instrument is of utmost importance, so that basically we give a fair chance to everyone to compete. We have an increase in the number of innovation and the investment in innovation, and ultimately we will end up with having also more consumer choice.
Okay. And a follow-up question, Alex, what kind of behavior do you think should be prohibited?
There are a number of behaviors which we have highlighted throughout our proposals. Behaviors such as preferencing, behaviors on advertising, vertical integrations. So there are a number of issues which we believe should be tackled by this instrument, because ultimately there are a number of problems which are more prevalent, more pertinent when it comes to these big tech players. Therefore, yes, there should be a list. We have suggested a list to the Commission. We hope that the Commission will take also the Parliament's recommendations, because again, with greater power comes greater responsibilities.
Okay. And Ricardo, there has been some preliminary talks in the Council about both the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act. And it's too early to know who thinks what exactly, but do you see some common ground or some divergences in the discussions?
Well, I think that it is not, because we moved from a first version of the SA, which would include ex-ante rules as a second block, and now we have a DMA as an independent proposal. We're going to have it, which means that we are talking not exactly about the same thing, despite the fact that there is a strong link. I would say that there is already some problems and some issues that have been identified by everyone, I would say. For example, the consumers feel disempowered. There is a lack of control regarding their own data. There is also some growing concern about business models based on selling consumers' data to advertisers. There is a big concern on enforcement. It means that the way that now the rules have been enforced are not effective at all. That's if we take a look on the number of counterfeiting or dangerous products online, it's increasing a lot. And it seems that the current measures don't be working effectively, especially while we are now living a second lockdown and we have to rely more and more on online access to goods and services. Those are for sure, despite the ones that have been already identified by Alex and very well said by him, that the definition of gatekeeper platform, if we're going to have both quantitative and qualitative criteria, this is something that it's also on the table and already got a lot of attention from several member states, as from the industry too.
Okay, and there's a question from the audience that kind of brings us back to the Digital Services Act, but also touches upon enforcement. Ricardo, I'm still going to put you on the spot for that one. So the question is, how can we fight against companies from China for selling online goods which are difficult to return and they don't answer complaints? So do you think that the Digital Services Act could tackle this issue?
Well, I think so. First of all, because the extraterritoriality change that will come up with the DSA, and it will, I think, and we really believe that it will make a change. Second, taking into consideration the enforcement side, we don't have an opinion. I must say that Portugal will play an honest broker role. We don't have a national position on both DSA and DMA, but I can tell you that as far as we understood from the several meetings that we've had during the last 2 months is that nobody wants to touch on the country of origin principle. But there are some sectors, some industries that came up with why not probably some derogations, because nowadays we see that many obstacles of countries of destination to protect their consumers, to protect their own companies, as national authorities do not engage or in cooperation efforts with some others, or they are not even able to face the problem, to be active, to be much more effective on enforcement. And I can give you some examples that have been shared with us. For example, for instance, some platforms that are selling dangerous or illegal medicines online, and from one member state to another. And nowadays, member states, they need to resort to lengthy judicial processes in courts to solve this kind of problem. It's Laura, just to share with you that enforcement discussion will be for sure one of the most important ones. And just reminding that Alex, on his report, he mentioned that we could have, I would say, an hybrid solution with a network and a strong enhanced mechanisms between national authorities, and at the same time, why not a central role to the Commission at the European level to move on with that?
Victoria, enforcement is a major pillar for existing legislation, but also future ones. So what are your thoughts on how enforcement is done today and how it should be done tomorrow?
Well, I think enforcement is very important because we're creating rules, but they're only effective and reaching their objective when they're properly enforced. And of course, there's always room for improvement, sometimes on more specific cases, and I don't want to go into details. But looking forward with the Digital Services Act, actually, the tech industry would just welcome better enforcement and make sure that the rules are applied. Now, if it comes to stronger member state cooperation or if it comes with the EU body, we actually open to discuss, and we just want the rules to be very clear, because the rules need to be clear for the consumer, for the SMEs, for the digital intermediaries, but also for the national authorities or that potential EU body. So we just invite you to have a clear role, clear processes, and to involve the different players around the table to discuss how practically to make it happen. One example, if I may name one, is, for instance, the notices. So for the moment, the Digital Services Act and is based on, well, will be likely review the e-commerce directive. And we would, for instance, welcome some harmonization when it comes to notices and potentially have more information on how valid a notice needs to be. Because when you receive a notification, say, just bring that content down without a URL or without a clear description, it might be quite challenging to bring that content that could be illegal or unsafe very quickly down. So that's a concrete example of how we could improve enforcement, is by improving and harmonizing the notice and action procedures, for instance.
And Andreas, we have a question from the audience. Is there a risk that imposing a blacklist of banned behavior could also limit competition between European firms in the EU?
It depends on the list. I haven't seen a list yet, or the ideas of the list, but if there is a whatever blacklist marketplaces should not do, or maybe it could have. At the moment, a lot of things are done because there is nobody who is saying, okay, it's not allowed, or it's not clear if it's allowed or not. And maybe kind of a list could make it clear for everybody, because at the moment it's just nobody knows what's right or what's wrong.
Okay. So there's a question that is more of a comment. So it says the tech boom in the US was not driven by stronger antitrust or regulatory regimes. We need in Europe a growth-oriented business policy instead. Alex, what are your thoughts on this comment?
So I believe that we need a balance of both. So we need to continue to invest in our industries, but at the same time, we need to create the right environment for industries to grow. And we also need the right regulatory framework. Today, we are dealing with a situation of basically having our e-commerce sector, our digital industries being regulated by a 20-year-old piece of legislation, a piece of legislation which has come into effect before the birth of the biggest tech giants nowadays that have become basically public utilities. And I believe that we cannot talk about Europe becoming a leader in this sector without having an up-to-date legislation, which if you look at the current e-commerce framework, I believe it was very future-proof piece of legislation 20 years ago, because we are still using it today. But at the same time, there are a number of issues, there are a number of black holes which are still not being regulated. And I think that today it is the right time to have a piece of legislation reflecting these new digital realities, reinforcing consumers' rights, reinforcing SMEs' rights, and also going in the direction of creating a more contestable environment, a more competitive environment online, and creating this level playing field between the online and the offline world. And I think that we have the right opportunity, a golden opportunity, which during the COVID-19 pandemic, when we have our citizens, our industries, which are much more reliant today than they were pre-pandemic, more reliant on our e-commerce, on our digital infrastructure. Therefore, the environment is the right environment right now to tackle these problems, which today are more visible. If we tackle them, we create the right environment, and therefore, directly, we will be also incentivizing our industries to become more competitive, not only on a European level, but also internationally. Therefore, these two issues are not separated, but they are interlinked.
Okay. There's another question from the audience that throws some serious shade on my home country, France. So, Victoria, this one is for you. Will the DSA create a real EU single market when countries like France keep pushing national rules and oppose the country of origin principle?
Well, thank you, Laura, for the question. I think, we should welcome member state initiative, because what the objective is to make sure that the internet is safe. And I think that's very much welcome. Now, of course, we believe, and we've heard that one of the barriers in your in your survey at the beginning, you said was fragmentation. So that's also something very important that we have to take into consideration, and we should rather have European legislation than 27 different initiatives. So one comment that was also made by Ricardo on the country of origin, I think that the country of origin is very important because that's what allows an SME to grow cross-border, to reach new businesses, new consumers, and potentially new other businesses if it's engaged in B2B. Now, on the country of destination, we can understand some of the points, and I think that's why we should sit all around the table to try to see how consumer protection could be ensured and how the rules could be clear. But the basic principle should be the country of origin because that's what allows SMEs to grow and offer their services across the single market. So that's really a core principle.
Okay, and to come back a bit to the question of competition with third-party sellers and third-party vendors, a question from the audience, maybe for you, Andreas, is they're asking whether it would be useful to force non-EU companies to appoint a legal representative in the EU. Andreas, do you think that would help European companies compete more fairly with non-EU companies?
I totally agree with that. So the biggest problem with third country sellers at the moment is that they can do whatever they want in the European Union. So in Germany, where there were some changes that the marketplaces are kind of responsible for taxes, because we know that many sellers from Asia didn't pay any sales tax. But I think it's still the case. They report maybe the wrong amount of taxes they have to pay. And there's not only tax, but there are some other issues, some other topics. A lot of them do not provide German return addresses or service addresses or whatever. And when it comes to more complicated products, maybe they have to related to security or health. You can't complain about them in the European Union. I made this experience with my little child. I bought a bottle warmer for traveling to Greece. And there was only an English manual in it, not German ones, and there was no address in the European Union. And that's not good for the customers. And for European companies, it's very hard to compete with these companies, because when you are located in the European Union, you have to follow all those rules, because otherwise you will be forced by your local government to do that and follow the European rules. And that costs some money and costs a lot of money to follow all the European rules.
Okay, and there's the follow-up question from the audience for you, Alex, because I know your report kind of touches up on that. Who should be in the online market, like online e-commerce value chain, who should be responsible for avoiding that dangerous products are sold to consumers?
So, first of all, I think that I totally agree with the point being made also by the representative, also by an SME in Europe, on the issue of basically of having this uncompetitive advantage, and this is something between European sellers and between sellers which are established in third countries. And I think this is another proof of how important it is to have this extraterritorial effect to our legislation, and also to have this balance also, and this level playing field between third country sellers and EU sellers, also by imposing the obligation for third country sellers to establish a branch in the EU. So if something goes wrong, if they don't comply, their products don't comply with EU technical harmonization on health and safety, a fundamental right for our consumers, there would be remedy for our consumers, something which is still inexistent today. When it comes to enforcement, cooperation, and ultimately, if we have these good-looking proposals, good-looking legislation on these on these issues that we are discussing today. But ultimately, we don't have an enforcement mechanism at EU level, at member states level, which will be equipped enough to be able to basically enforce them. This would be a useless exercise. So if you look at the current e-commerce directive, for example, you would see three important buzzwords which are totally missing. The buzzwords enforcement, cooperation, and supervision. If you look at the current directive, you will find no clue of these concepts and who is going to enforce this legislation. So for us, it was of fundamental importance to have, and we are moving forward, and if there wasn't a lot of disagreement when it came to online marketplaces provisions, when it came to the enforcement mechanism, there were a lot of different ideas being floated by different political groups. But I believe that we have reached a very good compromise with having a hybrid system, which is spearheaded by the Commission. There wasn't agreement on creating a supervisory authority at union level, but this is an issue whereby there needs to be a coordinated effort and an enforcement effort, and also giving all the right tools to our national enforcement bodies. Therefore, there should be something and organization at union level, and also enforcement of the national enforcement bodies at member state level, so that ultimately these provisions would be enforced in each and every member state.
Okay. Yeah, Ricardo, I see you want to. Yeah, sure, but we cannot hear you. Okay, we can hear you now. Perfect.
Okay. Now, just to add something on what Alex just mentioned, I think that this is a good, a unique, I would say, opportunity for us in Europe, at least to think about if we should, for example, keep limited liability regime independent from due diligence obligations or not, for example. This is a very important question. Or limited liability plus duty of care obligations that will, or which will balance the safe harbor regime of what, like we do have right now on the e-commerce directive. And at the same time, we've heard some proposals on new obligations, for example. Know your business customer principle, for example, is one of that new obligations that could come up and be included in the proposal. And for sure, something that as users, we feel the need of more transparency and control of us, consumers and users, but also more harmonized reporting obligations. This is something that will be on the table, and I think that the conclusion of this discussion and this exercise will for sure get the answer for your for the question that you've just raised. It's very important. We should not indeed avoid any kind of discussions right now when we talk about the liability regime, the duty of care. I think that we should be very, of course, in a very balanced manner, with a proportionate way. But this is something that will be, if not in the original proposal from the Commission, for sure, Alex and his colleagues in the Parliament will bring it to the table for sure.
Okay. Well, we have to wrap up, but before Alex, I have one last question for you. Don't hate me for that question. Do you want to be rapporteur for either the DSA or the DMA?
So I think that we have to see how this process will evolve. I am definitely sure that there will be a lot of interest from a lot of MEPs and also from a lot of different political groupings to be rapporteurs. There is the DON system in the European Parliament, so we have to see if S&D will be allocated the rapporteurship again of the DSA. But yes, I will definitely be interested. Again, this was a very good also learning curve for me. We had, I don't know how many meetings with different stakeholders, with different players, intermediating at so many different levels. So this was a very enriching experience for me, and I will definitely have another go to continue now to see this proposal taking shape at council level and also at commission level. But our priority right now is to see that the Parliament's ambitious recommendations that have been voted, and I think that this is a very important point also that the Commission has to take notice of. The IMCO report has been basically given a unanimous vote by all the mainstream political groups in the European Parliament. So it was full votes from Renew Europe, nearly full votes from SND, and also from EPP and the Greens. So we have the mainstream political groups in the European Parliament behind this report, behind these ambitious recommendations. We hope that the Commission on the 9th of December, both on the DSA and the DMA will be as ambitious as the Parliament's reports.
Well, thank you all, and back to you, Nick.
Very much. Laura, for guiding us through that great discussion. I want to thank all of our guests, Alex Aguiar-Selba, MEP from the S&D Group, Ricardo Castanheira, Digital and Technology Counselor at the Portuguese Permanent Representation, Andreas Muller, the owner of Delta Tech, and Victoria de Poisson, Senior Manager Public Policy at CCIA. Thanks for all the audience members, people who have tuned in online, submitted questions, tweeted. Thanks so much for participating and making this a lively debate despite the pandemic conditions. I want to thank our partner eBay for making this event possible in the first place. I would invite the audience to send in your feedback, any thoughts you have about the format, how we have this discussion, even though it is remote. Send your feedback to events@politico.eu, where someone's sure to read it and take it into account. Politico is going to continue hosting more virtual events this year on the hottest topics, certainly in the tech field and many others. And you can log into politico.eu/events/future-events to find out what those are. Thank you so much. Until next time. Bye-bye.